have been briefed by my security officials, and some members will have seen the statement from the Intelligence and Security Committee, as well as the letter from the Director General of MI5 and the Director General of GCHQ. The decision made by the Secretary of State for Housing was an independent, quasi-judicial planning one, and it concludes a process which began in 2018 when the then Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, gave formal diplomatic consent for China to use the Royal Mint site for its new embassy, subject to planning permission, and welcomed it as China's largest overseas investment. Now, given the potential for legal proceedings, it would not be appropriate to give a commentary on the grounds for the decision. In their decision, MHCLG notes that the package of security measures proposed would be proportionate to the proposed use of the site, and that no bodies with responsibility for national security, including the Home Office and the Foreign Office, have raised concerns or objected to the proposal on the basis of proximity of the cables or other underground infrastructure. Now, I know that some members have raised concerns regarding the security implications of the new embassy, and it is on that issue that I wanted to update the House. National security is the first duty of any government, and that is why the intelligence and security agencies have been absolutely integral to this process. The ISC, as the committee entrusted and empowered by this House to scrutinise the government's most sensitive information, have today released their judgment on the security implications. I thank them for their work and am reassured by the depth of their scrutiny throughout the process. The ISC concluded, and I'm quoting from their statement, "On the basis of the evidence we have received and having carefully reviewed the nuanced national security considerations, the committee has concluded that, taken as a whole, the national security concerns that arise can be satisfactorily mitigated." And I can confirm today that the Home Office has received a letter from the Director of GCHQ and the Director General of MI5, which makes clear that, as with any foreign embassy on UK soil, it is not realistic to expect to be wholly able to eliminate each and every potential risk. However, they say that the collective work across UK intelligence agencies and HMG departments to formulate a package of national security mitigations for the site has been, in our view, expert, professional and proportionate. They judge that the package of mitigations deals acceptably with a wide range of sensitive national security issues, including cabling, and indeed they note that there are clear security advantages from the consolidation. Clear security advantages. Now, our security services have over a century of experience managing security matters related to foreign embassies on UK soil. This government and the last have been aware of the potential for a new embassy at this site since the Chinese government completed the purchase in 2018. The issues that continue to be raised in the media reports are not new to the government or the intelligence community, and an extensive range of measures have been developed to protect national security. We have acted to increase the resilience of cables in the area through an extensive series of measures to protect sensitive data. And I can confirm that, contrary to reporting, the government had seen the unredacted plans for the embassy. And this government has agreed with China that the publicly accessible forecourt on the embassy grounds will not have diplomatic immunity, managing the risk to the public. Based on all of this and our extensive work on this matter, I am content that any risks are being appropriately managed. But let me be clear, the bill also brings clear national security advantages. Following extensive negotiations led by this government, the Chinese government has agreed to consolidate its 7 current sites in London into one site. That is why, following deep scrutiny by security officials, the government has been able to conclude that we can manage the security concerns related to the embassy. Whilst there are those who have, and no doubt continue to have concerns about this embassy, it is a fundamental and normal part of international relations that countries agree to establish embassies in each other's capitals. While some would stick their heads in the sand and ignore the obvious need to engage, this government is engaging with China confidently and pragmatically, recognising the complexity of the world as it is and challenging them where we need to. Because for our security, our economy and our climate, China matters. And to be clear, this is not a question of balancing economic and security considerations. We don't trade off security for economic access. Now, of course, we recognise that China poses a series of threats to UK national security, from cyber attacks, foreign interference and espionage targeting our democratic institutions, to the transnational repression of Hong Kongers, and of course China's support for Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. That's why I announced a package in November to protect our national security, which set out the range of the work the government is taking forward to strengthen the security of our democracy against the threat from foreign interference and espionage. It's also why, for example, in December 2025, the UK sanctioned 2 China-based companies that have carried out cyber attacks against the UK and its allies. And it's why we have completed work to remove Chinese-made surveillance equipment from sensitive sites. It is why the UK has sanctioned 50 Chinese companies under the Russia sanctions regulations as part of our efforts to take action against entities operating in third countries over economic and military support for Russia. And it's why I will be hosting a closed event in February with Vice-Chancellors to discuss the risks posed by foreign interference from a range of states and to signpost our plans to further increase the sector's resilience. But taking a robust approach to our national security does also include engaging with China. Under the previous government, engagement with China had ground to a halt. This made us no safer. Indeed, it is only through engagement that we can directly challenge China on its malicious activity. And by taking tough steps to keep us secure, we enable ourselves to cooperate in other areas, including in pursuit of safe economic opportunities which are in the UK's interest, but also in areas like organised immigration crime, narcotics trafficking, and serious organised crime. This is what our allies do, and this is what we're doing. Delivering for the public, putting more money in their pockets, and keeping them safe through hard-headed, risk-based engagement with the world's most consequential powers. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I am grateful to Right Honourable and Honourable Members for their ongoing attention that they give to protecting the UK's security. China has and will continue to pose threats to our national security. But following detailed consideration of all possible risks around this new embassy by expert officials across government, I am assured that the UK's national security is protected. Let me assure this House and the country upholding national security is the first duty of government, and we will continue to take all measures necessary to defeat these threats. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let us be in no doubt about the threat China poses. MI5 has warned that Chinese intelligence is actively trying to disrupt our democracy. Bounties have been placed on the heads of Hong Kong campaigners. Members of this House have been directly spied on by China. China actively supports Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, and China is infiltrating universities and businesses to acquire sensitive technology, as well as stealing it directly. Yet this government has failed again and again to take the action needed. This government failed to place China in the enhanced tier of the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme. This government failed to properly support the case against 2 men accused of spying for China on MPs in this House. And now they have shamefully approved plans for a Chinese super embassy. Despite everything China has done on our soil, China has been rewarded with exactly what they want: a super embassy that will be a base for espionage, not just in the UK, but likely across Europe as well. The government has capitulated to Chinese demands. The Prime Minister himself said to President Xi at the G20 in November 2024, and I quote, "You raised the Chinese embassy building in London when we spoke on the telephone. We have since taken action by calling in that application." In other words, the Prime Minister did precisely what President Xi told him to do, and then he faithfully reported back afterwards. This decision has serious implications. Last week, The Telegraph published plans showing 208 secret rooms and a hidden chamber just 1 metre from critical data cables. Our economy depends on those cables, so what assurance can the Minister give that those cables will be secure from Chinese interference? Now, in paragraph 97 of his decision notice, the Secretary of State who made the decision admits that he had not himself even seen unredacted plans before making his decision. So how can he possibly have assessed the risk himself as the decision maker without having seen those plans? The Secretary of State also admits at paragraph 13 that he did not follow our suggestion to hold sections 321 closed hearings to take evidence. Once again, how could the Secretary of State possibly have taken this decision in an informed way without having personally assessed the risk? And, Madam Deputy Speaker, it gets worse because paragraph 8.63 onwards of the Inspector's report admits that China can legally refuse to allow UK authorities to inspect the building during or after construction. So we're going to have no idea what they're actually building in there in any event. Now, the Minister references the ISC. He says that someone in government has seen unredacted plans, although we know that was not the decision maker, the Secretary of State. So can I ask, have the ISC seen those unredacted plans? Because it has been suggested to me that they have not seen those unredacted plans. The ISC say the risks can be mitigated, but mere mitigation is not enough. Mitigation entails only a partial exclusion of risk, and nothing is said about how to manage future developments in China's capabilities, developments we cannot anticipate today. The ISC also says, and the Minister for some reason forgot to quote this, but they also say the government process was not robust enough. They say it lacked clarity on national security. The ISC say the key reports lack the necessary detail. And the ISC said the government does not have the dexterity required to handle China. Does the Minister accept those elements of the ISC report? And others share those concerns. A US government source was recently quoted saying the UK had, quote, downplayed the risks. The White House last week was reported to be, quote, deeply concerned. And the US House China Committee chair says that he opposes these plans on the grounds Americans' data may be at risk. Does the Minister agree with our American allies? Madam Deputy Speaker, it is clear this decision is timed shortly before a planned trip by the Prime Minister to China. He apparently intends to seek some kind of economic deal with China in order to fix the mess he and the Chancellor have created here, with jobs down and unemployment up since the election. From its timing and from President Xi's clear demands, this planning consent appears linked to the Prime Minister's imminent visit and linked to the economic deal. It seems clear to me that they are trading national security for economic links, and this is a shameless capitulation to China's demands. China is spying on us, it is subverting our democracy, it is repressing people on our soil, and it is stealing our technology. Isn't the truth this? In those circumstances, giving them what they want is simply the wrong thing to do.
Before I call the Minister, can I gently remind shadow ministers and spokesmen that there is a time limit which the honourable gentleman exceeded somewhat. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I listened very carefully to what the Shadow Home Secretary had to say. There was a glaring gap in his analysis, and he didn't seem to want to have to say anything about the level of challenge that we inherited from the previous government in terms of the lay-down of the diplomatic estate. He didn't want to accept that, as with other countries, there is a degree of risk which has to be managed. And I explained very carefully and made sure that he had the opportunity to come in this morning for a briefing. And I was at pains to stress in my opening remarks that whilst, of course, balanced views have to be taken about these things, there are national security advantages to the proposals that have been agreed. Now, I know that he and honourable members opposite don't want to agree with that, but I think it is important that we debate the right honourable gentleman says it's nonsense. No, he's absolutely entitled to his opinion, as is this government. And I hope that he takes the opportunity to look very carefully at what the Director Generals of MI5 and GCHQ have to say. I also say to the right honourable gentleman, and to some but not all members opposite, that actually this is also a moment, hopefully, where we could have discussed these things in a sort of sensible and reasonable way, and that's how we should approach matters relating to national security. But also, I don't think it would be such a bad thing for a bit of humility from some members opposite. Not least because the attack that we heard from the Shadow Home Secretary, the attack that other honourable members have already engaged with, might have actually sort of landed a bit fairer and a bit truer if they hadn't spent 14 years in government, flitting between hot and cold, neither consistent nor credible on what is, after all, one of the most complex geopolitical challenges that we face. The party opposite went from golden age to ice age, from welcoming China with open arms to choosing to disengage almost entirely. And that's with the world's largest nation, who, along with Hong Kong, are our second largest trading partner. Now, it's convenient for some members opposite to forget that it was, of course, Boris Johnson, as Conservative Foreign Secretary in 2018, who granted consent for the Royal Mint site to be used as diplomatic premises. He was proud, and I quote, to welcome the fact that this is China's largest overseas diplomatic investment, Conservative Foreign Secretary. In recent times, of course, we've seen Conservative MPs U-turn on the original position of their government and take a different approach. This government will ensure that the approach that we will take will be underpinned by ensuring that we engage consistently and pragmatically with China, but we will do so in a way that absolutely ensures our national security. The House will have heard the important contributions that have been made by the ISC and the conclusion that they have drawn. The House, the country will have heard the comments that we've seen from the Director Generals. These are important contributions. Nobody should underestimate how seriously government has taken this matter. We've engaged with it incredibly closely. The intelligence security agencies have been involved with this process from the outset. I can give an assurance to those who have doubts that we will, of course, continue to monitor this process very carefully, but we believe that this is the right judgment.
Can I respectfully say to the Minister, that was an incredibly long answer, indeed longer even than the question, and perhaps questions and responses need to be briefer. Rushnara Ali.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many of my constituents will continue to have serious concerns about the proposed new embassy in my constituency. These include China's human rights record, espionage and local disruption in particular. A development of this scale would cause significant disruption for local residents, especially in Royal Mint Court, who are now facing considerable uncertainty, including privacy concerns and fear of losing their homes. What assurances can the government provide my constituents, that, and particularly those residents, regarding their concerns? And can the Minister say more about the national security concerns and how they will be satisfactorily mitigated?
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is an assiduous member of this House, and she represents her constituents incredibly seriously. She will understand that for obvious reasons there are limits to what I can say with regard to the specific measures and the specific mitigations that will be put in place. But I am grateful to her for entirely understandably raising the concerns that some of her constituents will have expressed. What I can assure her is that we will want to work very closely with her to minimise any disruption to local residents. And of course, I'd be happy to discuss these matters with her further.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Minister for advance sight of his statement and for the time his officials took to brief me earlier today. The government's decision to approve plans for the Chinese mega embassy represent far more than a planning matter. It shows that ministers have learnt very little from evidence exposed in recent months of Chinese spying efforts to infiltrate British politics and this House. Throughout this stunted process, we on these benches have consistently called these plans out for what they are, a mistake. The government knows that this decision that they have made today will further amplify China's surveillance efforts here in the UK, endangering the security of our data. Planning conditions are meaningless without proper enforcement. Given the unprecedented security concerns surrounding this site, how will the government ensure planning conditions are rigorously monitored and enforced, particularly in regards to the underground cables that the current plans come dangerously close to? But no amount of planning conditions can address the fundamental problem. The embassy does not clean Chinese officials of their human rights abuses. It is shocking that China has placed bounties on the heads of democracy activists from Hong Kong who live in the UK. This type of interference and intimidation in our country is totally unacceptable. So in light of this decision, will the government include all Chinese officials, Hong Kong Special Administrative Region officials and Chinese Communist Party-linked organisations on the enhanced tier of the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme? Beyond the security and diplomatic concerns, there are fundamental questions around our democratic freedoms. The previous Conservative government attacked our fundamental right to protest, and this Labour government has continued to erode these freedoms. As a democratic society, we must protect the right to protest peacefully, including near embassies and including for those Hong Kongers living in the UK. Will the government continue to guarantee the right to protest even as this embassy now moves ahead?
Minister.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady, not least because she came along in good faith this morning and attended the briefing at our invitation, and I hope that she found that helpful. I am acutely conscious that there are technical details that the House will understand that I am not able to get into, and that is why we took the opportunity to brief the Honourable Lady and other Right Honourable members this morning. I'm afraid I don't agree with her analysis at the beginning of her statement in terms of our understanding of the threat. I referenced earlier on in my opening remarks the very significant number of measures that we've taken in recent times in order to protect our national security. But she did ask me about the cables. So let me take the opportunity to update her and the House with regard to that specific point. Let me say to her that the allegations that have been much discussed in the media are of course not new to us or to the security agencies. Our intelligence services have scrutinised the plans and an extensive range of measures have been developed and are being implemented to protect national security, including putting in place additional resilience measures to protect sensitive data. Now, the House will understand that the Honourable Member opposite asked me what that means. I hope that he will understand that it would be unwise of me to get into the technical detail of the mitigations that we're seeking to put in place. I hope he understands, surely, that the Security Minister isn't able to get into the guts and the detail of precisely what we're going to do. But if he's just patient for...
I'm simply not going to have this. There's too much chuntering and indeed yelling across the chamber from the sedentary position, and the Minister might focus on responding to the question that was asked by the Lib Dem spokesperson, not to heckling from the rest of the chamber. Security Minister.
I'm grateful to you, Madam Deputy Speaker, that an honourable member opposite did make a point about transparency, and I think it's important that I take the opportunity to give as much detail as I am. But it's important for the honourable gentleman over there to understand that as the Security Minister, I can't get into the absolute detail of precisely what we're going to do for what I thought would have been fairly obvious reasons. But let me say to the Honourable Lady that the government has been aware of the potential new embassy proposal since 2018. Our security services have been involved throughout that process, and an extensive range of measures have been developed and are being implemented to protect our national security. I can say to her and give her the assurances that I think she seeks, that an extensive range of measures have been developed and are being implemented to protect our national security. Now, she also, I think quite unfairly, I have to say, criticised the government's belief in the right to protest. I do not think that that is a fair critique. The government takes very seriously the right of people to protest in our country. It is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the government will always ensure that people have the ability to protest in a peaceful way. She also asked, entirely reasonably, about FERS. I'm waiting for the honourable member opposite to ask me about it as well. She will know that FERS is still a new scheme. It only relatively recently came into force, the 1st of July, or more effectively on the 1st of October. She will also understand that any decision with regard to FERS will be brought forward to Parliament in the usual way.
Alex Barras-Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I thank my right honourable friend for the statement, which is of course complex and of course raises very significant issues which are shared on both sides and all sides of the House. With respect, of course, to the issue of national security, which he has talked about in his statement, I fully appreciate he's unable to talk about the mitigations that have been put in place, but I'm grateful that he has re-emphasised that point a number of times. I wonder going forwards, as part of the ongoing evergreen nature of assessing the risks that we face, both during the building of this embassy and if it continues and beyond, whether he is able to assure the House that wherever possible he will keep this place updated about any continuing change in the risk assessments, and if it requires a more detailed analysis, that the ISC is fully abridged of that.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable member. He's right to say that these are complex decisions, and he's right to make the point that clearly there are very significant restrictions on what can be said here in this chamber. I can give him the assurances that he seeks. Ultimately, of course, it is for the Intelligence and Security Committee themselves to decide on whatever particular lines of avenue that they might want to proceed on. But I can say to him that we've given that committee very close assurances of the work that is being done, and they've had access to material in order to take their own view. And I make a commitment to him and to Right Honourable Gentleman sat at the back, who's the Vice Chair of that committee, that we will continue to engage with them in a constructive way. And where we feel it's necessary or appropriate to update the House further, of course we will do that.
Vice Chair of the ISC, Sir Jeremy Wright.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. As you and the House would expect, the Intelligence Security Committee has investigated the security implications of this proposal, specifically whether the intelligence community had sufficient opportunity to feed in any security concerns, and whether ministers had the necessary information on which to base a decision. And if you'll permit me, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to quote directly from the conclusions we've reached, which represent our unanimous view as a committee. On the basis of the evidence we have received, and having carefully reviewed the nuanced national security considerations, the committee has concluded that, taken as a whole, the national security concerns that arise can be satisfactorily mitigated. I will say, though, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we have been concerned solely with the national security perspective here, not with the other arguments for or against a new embassy. And if I may say to the Minister, it has proved more difficult than it should have been to get straightforward answers to our basic questions. The process within government does not seem to us to be effectively coordinated, nor as robust as would have been expected. In particular, there was a lack of clarity about the role that national security considerations play in planning decisions. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we will take those matters up further, as I know the Minister would expect, with the government.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman and to all members of his committee. Parliament entrusts the ISC to hold government to account, and they are able to do that in a way that other Right Honourable and Honourable members are not able to do. I think the Right Honourable Gentleman made two key points. The first was to share the analysis of the committee with regard to the national security concerns that have been expressed. I hope members on all sides of the House listen very carefully to what he has had to say and look very carefully at the judgment that his committee has arrived at. He did, though, make an important point, which I take seriously, about process. And I have no doubt that there is quite a lot that can be learned from the process point that he has made in this House today. And I am very happy to discuss that with him and his committee to identify what lessons should be learned and make sure that we do things better next time.
Derek Twigg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can I just, place on record, I support completely what the Deputy Chair of the ISC, of which I'm also a member, has just said, and say to the Minister that the process issue is something that needs looking at urgently, because the Deputy Chair was very clear about the problems we faced with that. But can I say to the Minister asking this, that obviously the very important letter today from GCHQ MI5 heads to the Foreign Secretary and the Home Secretary, within that letter, it says very clearly the collective work across the UK intelligence agencies and Her Majesty's Government's departments to formulate a package of national security mitigations for the site has been, in our view, expert, professional and proportionate. Would you like to comment on that?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, well, I'm grateful to him, and I reiterate the points that I've made about process. I have a huge amount of respect for the committee. I've had the, describe it as the pleasure of appearing in front of them not so long ago. I don't think it's a state secret to make the point that they gave me a pretty tough grilling, and absolutely that's how it should be. But the point he's made about process, I think, is an important one. I think the point that he's made also about the letter from the Director Generals is also important. It is a rare occurrence for Director Generals to make public comment. They are both people who are extremely professional. They are people that I have the pleasure of working with on a regular basis. They are both people of great integrity, and the House and the country should listen very carefully to what they have to say. They have made the point that collectively our security services have 100 years of experience in terms of dealing with the challenges from foreign embassies. That is not to be remotely complacent about the nature of the threat that we face now, because clearly it is very different from how it was in the past. But I think we should listen carefully to what they have to say, be respectful of it, whilst at the same time not being complacent.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I don't think I'm breaking the Official Secrets Act if I gently point out that when I used to chair the Intelligence and Security Committee, I repeatedly deprecated the use of the word mitigation because it covers such a wide range of sins. But leaving aside security considerations just this once, does the Minister accept, as he should, that this is a colossal propaganda win for totalitarian communist China?
Yes.
And is there any argument which was used in favour of China getting this embassy that wouldn't have carried exactly the same weight if totalitarian imperialist Russia had wanted to buy this building? Would the government have stopped them for doing it? And if they would have done, on what grounds?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful, as I always am, to the Right Honourable Gentleman. And I genuinely am, because I actually respect the wisdom of someone who's served in this House for many years. The Right Honourable Lady is sort of questioning my gratitude to the Right Honourable Gentleman. I can give her an assurance that I have a huge amount of respect. I am answering the question. I have a huge amount of respect for members who've served for a long period of time, and particularly those who've chaired the ISC. And I think we do need to find a kind of a mechanism in order to ensure that members like the Right Honourable Gentleman have access to some of this information so that they can make informed comment in this House. I take his point, although I don't agree with it, about mitigations. He understands there are limits to what I can say with regard to the mitigations, but I take the point that he's made. In terms of his substantive point, I don't agree with him. I don't accept that this is a win, not least because I could not have been clearer about the importance of the consolidation of the estate. The government has reached an agreement with China that the existing diplomatic footprint in London will be reduced in size from 7 diplomatic sites to 1. I'm not sure that kind of constitutes a particularly big win in my book, not least it is a statement of truth, and I think it undermines the argument that he's made.
Mark Seward.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Even if we accept that the national security concerns of this new embassy have been mitigated, as evidenced by the letters from security agencies today, and even if we accept that consolidating these 7 current properties that China own into one is a security advantage, that is still cold comfort to the Hong Kongers that I represent in Leeds southwestern Morley. They still have to live with transnational repression. In the case of Chloe Chung, she still has to live with a £100,000 bounty on her head. And of course, they now still have to live in fear that this new embassy might become their prison. So can I ask the Security Minister, what assurances can he give Hong Kongers in my constituency, indeed the UK, that they will be protected from the ever-lengthening arm of the CCP?
Minister.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't accept the basis of the argument that my honourable friend has made, and I think he would be well advised to place more emphasis on the point about consolidation, because I'm confident that that will deliver meaningful operational benefits, and that's a point that's been agreed by the security experts. But let me find what I hope is an important point of consensus, and that is to be absolutely clear about how unacceptable it is for China or for any other nation, for that matter, to seek to persecute individuals who are resident here in the United Kingdom. The government takes these matters incredibly seriously. That's why, through the Defending Democracy Task Force, which I chair, we've completed a very significantly extensive piece of work looking into transnational repression. There are a number of actions that have come from that piece of work which have been rooted right across government. We take it incredibly seriously. I myself have met with a number of people who've been the victim of TNR, and it is, as I say, completely unacceptable for China or anyone to persecute people in this country. But I would just ask him just to consider that we're talking about a proposal that will deliver an embassy for China at some point in the future. What I have to do and what the government has to do with deal with the level of threat as it is. And I'm confident, given the point about consolidation, that actually this is a proposal that we will be able to work in the national interests of our country and all of the people who live here.
Father of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
Whilst I associate myself with the wider security concerns, will the Minister forgive me if I raise a narrow point? And he knows what I'm going to ask, because I've asked this twice already and not had an answer. The correspondence between the government and the Chinese reveals that the medieval monastery on the site, an important monastery called Eastminster rather than Westminster, where we are, will remain on inviolable Chinese territory. And any UK citizens visiting it will have to be frisked, and they will be effectively in China. What reassurance can the Minister give to those who have bounties on their head, raised by the Honourable Gentleman opposite, or my right honourable friend, the member for Chingford, who's been sanctioned by the state? What reassurances can the Minister give that UK citizens visiting their own heritage would not be in danger by going on this site?
Minister.
Well, I'm grateful to the Father of the House. He's consistently made this point. This is at least the third time that I've heard him raise it. I hope he will have heard the point I made. I looked at him purposefully earlier on when I made a point specifically about the question that he's raised. But let me take the opportunity to say that the issues that he reflected upon, the bounties, this is completely unacceptable behaviour, and the government will not stand for it. The specific point that he raised is one that I've looked very carefully at, and I reflected a response to it earlier in my statement.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I had been sceptical about this new embassy, but I do take the points made by members from the Intelligence and Security Committee here today, as well as the advice, the response from GCHQ and MI5. I also, of course, have to listen to my own constituents, including the Bracknell Forest Hong Kong community, who tell me that they are concerned about the ongoing transnational repression that they are experiencing. My right honourable friend has already talked a lot about the work that the government has already done. Will he commit to continuing to engage with the Hong Kong community so that we can make sure that we continue to adapt our response to the emerging threats that they experience?
Well, I'm grateful to him. He's consistently raised points on behalf of his constituents, and I can give him the assurances that he seeks. Let me say to him and the House that we condemn the Hong Kong police's efforts to coerce, intimidate, harass and harm those living in the UK and overseas. These acts of repression will not be tolerated here in our country. Now, I can say to him that along with other ministerial colleagues, I've taken the opportunity to raise these concerns directly with Chinese authorities, reaffirming that the extraterritorial application of Hong Kong's national security law is unacceptable and will not be tolerated here in the UK. I can give him the assurances that he seeks. I'm very happy to discuss this matter with him further.
Luke Taylor.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Hong Kongers and other Chinese dissidents in the UK will be rightly concerned by this news today. And I want to make it completely clear that Liberal Democrats have serious concerns that this project will enhance China's ability to conduct transnational repression against Britons and Hong Kongers on British soil. So can I ask the Minister, what is the timeline for closing the 7 existing Chinese consulate buildings when the Royal Mint Court is opened? Will the government publish the 2018 note verbal confirming the embassy was contingent on planning approval, ensuring the government did not prejudge the application? And finally, paragraph 62 of the Secretary of State permission letter states that lawful embassy use of the site would give no worry of interference with the sensitive cabling that runs adjacent to the secret basement rooms. After China's proven record of unlawful espionage against MPs, British institutions, does the Minister agree that this is a catastrophic misjudgment and that we have no hope of our laws being observed by the Chinese Communist Party?
When questions run to 2 pages and take a minute, perhaps members might think about cutting them down slightly. Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, well, the honourable gentleman has expressed an opinion, and he's entirely within his rights to do that. But I hope he understands that I'm also entirely within my rights to point out to him that the opinion that he has expressed is not one that is backed up by the intelligence services and by the security agencies who've looked incredibly carefully at the detail of the proposal. He states boldly that this new proposed embassy site will deliver an additional capability to China over and above what they currently have. But I make to him again the point about consolidation and the point about the security advantages that we think will be accrued by this proposal. In terms of the points around timeline, I hope he understands that I'm not going to get into that today, not least because I have to be incredibly careful what I say, given the potential likelihood of further legal proceedings. But I'm very happy to discuss these matters with him and his colleagues on his benches further.
Alex Sobel.
Thank you. I just want to first of all make it clear I don't agree with this decision today. It will send a chilling effect through Tibetans, through Hong Kongers, through Uyghurs and other Chinese who just dissent with the regime in Beijing. But I've got 3 specific questions about the application today. First of all, what guarantees does the government have that the 7 other sites will be closed and disposed of? Will the new site be built by British construction companies hiring workers in the usual way, or by Chinese construction companies bringing in their own labour? And what forms of building inspection control will be present during and after the construction?
Well, my honourable friend has got a very long and proud track record in this particular area, and I listened very carefully to what he has to say. He'll forgive me if I disagree with his analysis of the chilling effect of this, not least given the points about consolidation and the security advantage. He's asked about the 7 sites, and let me give him and the House an absolute assurance that that is part of the deal that has been agreed with China. The deal is that the existing diplomatic footprint within London, the 7 diplomatic sites, will be consolidated into this individual site. In terms of the precise details around construction and other activities, I know that he will understand that there are agreed procedures with regard to these kind of activities. I think there was a point earlier on about the relationship with the United States and the concerns that they might have expressed, which I don't recognise. But it is useful to note that China built a new embassy in the United States not so long ago. So this is not a particularly uncommon occurrence. But I give him assurance that we'll keep a very close eye on the points that he makes.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I say gently to the right honourable gentleman that I raise these issues as a sanctioned individual, Not only I'm sanctioned, my whole family is sanctioned. I have been trolled by operatives from the security service of China, and I am under constant regard by them all the way through. So I say this in a way on the basis of that. And I simply ask him this. When the Secretary of State issued his letter, he did give this quote, which was given earlier on, that this concern about cable should not present a problem for a lawful embassy use. Nothing about the Chinese is lawful here in the United Kingdom. Is it lawful for them to attack Hong Kongers who have fled here? Is it lawful for the pop-up police stations that go on pulling them in? Is it lawful for them to actually make sure that bounties are placed on their heads? Is it lawful for them to be asking British citizens sitting next door to Hong Kongers to bring them into the embassy so they may collect their bounty? These are all unlawful acts. The truth is, this Chinese embassy, with its 200 extra staff, will increase that. Every single place that China has had more people in its embassy, transnational repression has increased. Doesn't he agree with that?
Yeah. Minister.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, try though I might, there was never going to be a scenario where I would be able to satisfy the right honourable gentleman today in terms of what I've been able to say. He and I have exchanged on these matters on many occasions, and it is completely intolerable and unacceptable that he and members of his family have been sanctioned, and he knows the government's position with regard to that. He mentioned the issue of law. UK law is absolutely sacrosanct, and where anyone, whoever they might be, falls short of that, they will be held to account by this government. He made a specific point about the potential, I think, for an increase in staff. Again, there are very clear procedures that rest with the Foreign Office that where a foreign nation seeks to bring additional staff resource into a country, all of that has to go through the normal diplomatic channels and has to be agreed by the Foreign Secretary. Now, I know that he doesn't support these proposals. I understand that he has strong views, which I have a lot of respect for, but I hope that he can respect the fact that we have engaged seriously with this proposal. The security services have been involved from the outset, and ultimately, government has to take a view. We've taken a view that the national security implications of this can be mitigated. We've also taken a view, and I know that some honourable members opposite don't agree with it, that there could well be some security advantages as a consequence of these proposals. But I undertake to keep him and honourable members up to date, and if he wishes to discuss it somewhere else other than this chamber, then I'd be very happy to do that.
Chris Law.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can the Minister confirm the UK Government is happy rewarding and emboldening a nation who has one of the worst human rights records, who conducts espionage on his islands and in our Parliament, who has imprisoned the UK national Jimmy Lai on trumped-up charges, who has committed crimes against humanity against the Uyghurs, and who is the single most important enabler of Russia's illegal war machine against Ukraine and its civilian population that we as parliamentarians have stood against united?
I'm sorry to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I don't agree with the honourable gentleman's framing of his question. Whilst he's entirely right to raise specific concerns in the way that he did, this is not about rewarding China. It is not. It is about the importance of engaging confidently and pragmatically in a way that will enable us to take up opportunities where they present themselves and where it is in our national security. And as I made clear from my earlier remarks, that isn't just about economic cooperation. There are other areas where we do need to cooperate with China. I referenced three in my opening comments, including on organised immigration crime, serious organised crime, and on narcotics trafficking. These are important areas where we do need to work with China. But ultimately, the most important thing is that we safeguard our national security. And that's why we've worked incredibly closely to look carefully at the detail of this proposal and to make sure that we've got the right mitigations in place. And that's what we've done.
Dr. Kieran Mullen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the Minister explain, by giving China the embassy that it wants, how the government is demonstrating, in his own words, that it's responsible for unacceptable behaviour that the government won't stand for?
In part because of the reduction in the diplomatic estate from 7 down to 1.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So the Chinese communist regime, they sanction members of this House. They spy on members of this House. They carry out more cyber attacks than any other country. And the Minister admits that they are a national security threat. And yet the government thinks it's a good idea to kowtow to the Beijing bullies and allow this mega embassy. If it's in the national economic interest, Minister, could the Minister confirm that some British steel might be used in this Chinese embassy? And can he guarantee that this is in our national security interest completely for British citizens?
Minister.
Well, I congratulate the honourable gentleman on getting the clip that he no doubt will be posting on social media in the not too distant future, and that is up to him. I mean, the honourable gentleman seems to operate in a world that is quite selective in terms of some of the decisions that it seeks to make. I looked over to him earlier when I referenced the requirement for cooperation on areas like organised immigration crime. I don't know whether he thinks that's a good thing. I don't know whether he or his party have a policy about whether, given the concerns that are shared across this House, we should be engaging with China on matters relating to immigration. As part of the work to stop the small boat crossings across the Channel, he will understand, I hope, that it is, of course, necessary to engage with our near neighbours, but it is also necessary to engage internationally. I'm not clear whether he thinks that's a good thing, and I'm not clear whether he thinks that we should engage with China on those matters. What I am clear about is that this government will engage pragmatically, do the right thing, secure the economic opportunities, but fundamentally will always make sure that we will underpin our national security. And in terms of his point about British steel, that is a fair one. This government will always want to support UK-based manufacturers and UK-based industry. So let's always look for, let's end on a point of consensus. Let's always look for opportunities to buy British.
I'm very hopeful that we can find a point of consensus, that questions need to be shorter, answers need to be shorter. I intend to keep the Minister here until all members have been satisfied this afternoon, but we do need to speed up. Mark Francois.
There's a pattern of behaviour here. The failure to act meaningfully over Jimmy Lai, the mysterious collapse of the Chinese spy case, and now this abject national humiliation. Let's call this what it is. This is appeasement of communist China. For economic gain. We tried that in the 1930s, and look where that got us. Why is this Labour government kowtowing to China, a communist regime that imprisons 1 million Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps for having the temerity to believe in God?
Well, in one sense, I can agree with the right honourable gentleman that there is a pattern of behaviour. He's right about that. The pattern of behaviour is doing the right thing and making sure that we safeguard our national security. And he might roll his eyes, but he was a minister in the previous government. He's served in this House for a number of years. He knows that under his Conservative government, there was a complete lack of consistency with regard to our policy for China. Now, this is a significant geostrategic challenge, and in the end, government has to make decisions. It has to have a clear-eyed policy, but anyone who thinks that we shouldn't be engaging with China, I think is naive. Anyone, he uses the language that he does, which I think is inappropriate and unhelpful and inaccurate. I've made the point about consolidation, I've made the point about the national security advantages, and I'll make the point about this government's commitment to securing our national interest. Let me just say one final thing to him. He's right to raise the case of Jimmy Lai. He knows the government's clear commitment that Jimmy Lai should be released immediately.
Steve Barclay.
Madam Deputy Speaker, does the Minister believe that the approval of this mega Chinese embassy makes the British people safer?
Minister.
Well, the right honourable gentleman is very experienced from his own time in government, and he will know that difficult decisions have to be made. But it is my judgment, ultimately, this is the right way to proceed, that we do have to engage with China for the reasons that I've explained, but ultimately, nothing will prevent this government from ensuring our national security. And that's why we've progressed this proposal incredibly carefully, and that's why we've made sure that we've got the right mitigations in place.
Colin Lockhart.
Deputy Speaker, last week I made it clear that any hostile intelligence service would struggle to find a better location for espionage than the now approved mega Chinese embassy. What assessment has now been made of the risk that this site could be used for surveillance, intimidation or coercion of critics of the oppressive communist regime living in the UK, and how the government justify a decision that is both shameful and reckless in the disregard for national security?
Well, I'm grateful to her for the points that she's made, but I would just say to her, of course, we're already dealing with those challenges. There are some honourable members who seem to think that we don't have to mitigate and manage those risks at the moment. We do. There are those, and it's an entirely reasonable position if people want to take it, who think that the situation could get worse with the agreement of this embassy. But as I've tried to explain, because of the mitigations that we have put in place and because of the consolidation of the diplomatic estate, there are clear national security advantages as a consequence of this proposal. She doesn't perhaps agree now, but I hope she understands that the government takes these matters incredibly seriously and will do everything that we can to safeguard our national security.
Sir Desmond Swing.
China is notoriously transactional in its international relations. So what do we get in return?
Well, I always listen very carefully to the right honourable gentleman, not least because I seem to remember that he was the PPS to the then Prime Minister Lord Cameron, when the then government had quite a different relationship with China to the one that we have now. He will remember that very well, as do I. So whilst I'm grateful for his advice, I hope that he will perhaps have borne in mind the points I made about the consistency of the previous government, including the one he served in.
Esther McVeigh.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In light of what you said, I do hope you see this as a short question, and I do hope I get a short answer. Minister, do the security services have any concerns at all about the proposed new super Chinese embassy? Yes or no?
Minister.
The Right Honourable Lady has seen the letter that's been published today by the Director Generals. I don't know how much time the Right Honourable Lady thinks about matters relating to national security or understands the nature of the threat. Not at all. I'm seeking to explain to her that this government, like the last government, manage a range of national security risks. That will be the case whatever decision was taken around this proposal.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm going to ask again. Does this make the British public safer? Yes, or no?
Minister.
Fundamentally, government is there to make the British people safer. And for the reasons I've explained, I'm confident that from a national security perspective, this is the right decision.
Jim Allister.
Isn't the plain truth, Minister, that this was a predetermined political decision from the moment the political decision was taken to call it in, when the government was facing, by due process, the Council refusing this planning application? And all that's gone on, doesn't it simply bring the whole planning process into disrepute?
Yes or no?
And when we consider today that the London Labour Group have condemned this matter, isn't one of their members right when he says, wrong embassy, in the wrong place, at the wrong time?
Yes or no?
Well, I don't agree with his analysis. I've been crystal clear about the fact that people are, of course, entitled to their opinion, and people will have different views. What sensible members of the public will be interested in is what the security professionals have said. The security agencies, the intelligence services, those people who really understand the nature of the risk and the threat. What the public will be interested in is what they think, and I've been clear about what they think. I've been clear about the way in which we've approached this process, which I believe will deliver national security benefits for our country.
Sir Bernard Jenkins.
Can I just point out that when the previous Conservative government proclaimed a golden era of relations with China, when David Cameron welcomed President Xi for a state visit in 2015, as Theresa May was championing Huawei for our 5G infrastructure, the security services supported the then Prime Minister, or they were brought into line, which is, I expect, what happens under these circumstances. Can we make sure that we're not using the the security services for propaganda purposes. And may I predict, in the fullness of history, we will look back at this decision with great regret.
Well, the right honourable gentleman, I know, gives a lot of thought and dedication to these matters. He spoke and reflected upon the engagement that had taken place under the previous government, under the then Prime Minister David Cameron. He will understand, because he thinks about these things very carefully, that there is obviously a need to engage with China. President Trump will be visiting China in the next couple of months. President Macron, I think, has been 3 times over the past years. Prime Minister Carney has been there recently. Serious grown-up people understand the need to have engagement and work closely with countries like China. Sensible people will get that. Sensible people will also understand that sometimes that involves tough choices. This government doesn't shy away from making those tough choices in terms of whether it's the right thing to do. I accept the challenge that he offers, which it will be judged over the long term. But I think this is the right thing to do, and I'm pleased that the security services agree with it.
Sarah Ball.
Deputy Speaker. The Minister says that China continues to pose a risk, and yet the government today welcomed this Trojan horse of an embassy into the heart of our capital. Consolidation helps them, not us, and planning conditions deal with the establishment, but not the actual real use inside in the years to come. So I ask again, it's been asked many a time before, are the British people safer as a result of this embassy? Yes or no?
Minister.
I don't agree with her analysis with regard to consolidation. This government will always work to make sure that the British public are safer. That is our job. That is our abiding mission. It is the first responsibility of government. And I'm confident that the decision that's been taken, with the mitigations in place, will deliver good national security outcomes for our country.
John Lamont.
Thank you very much. The government's decision to approve China's spy embassy is utterly wrong and puts national security at risk. But now the embassy has been approved, if, or rather when, we get evidence that China is using this embassy for surveillance, torture or other inappropriate means, will the government guarantee to close that embassy?
Yes or no?
Well, as with any embassy, both in this country, and of course let's not be naive about the fact that Britain has embassies right around the country. The Vienna Convention lays down the way in which different governments should behave with regard to the conduct of their diplomatic presences. Of course, we take our responsibilities very seriously under the Vienna Convention, and we expect every other country, including China, to do the same.
Ben Obsi-Jecti.
Deputy Speaker, the Minister will be pleased to know I'm not going to ask him about furs. But he did quote extensively from this weighty tome of a planning application, or planning approval rather. He said, the Secretary of State notes that no bodies with responsibility for national security, including the Home Office and FCDO, have raised concerns. But he didn't mention that it goes on to say that the Secretary of State considers that the lack of objection from these bodies on this issue carries significant weight. Now, given that extensive measures had to be put in place to protect sensitive data, can you explain why neither the Home Office nor the FCDO put in any objections to the proximity of the data cables and their vulnerability? And if I may, on the issue of the consolidation of the consular buildings, last week the government informed me that it has no record of how many properties within London, or within the UK in fact, are owned by the Chinese state. And therefore, in terms of consolidating consular buildings, how will they keep track on other buildings that are used unofficially by the Chinese state?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm disappointed that the honourable gentleman hasn't asked me about furs, because I've got a very good response for him, which I won't be able to give him now. But he's not quite right to say that I quoted extensively from the planning document. I didn't at all. I referenced it only very fleetingly and then explained why that was the case. His key point was around the points that have been brought forward by the Home Office and the Foreign Office. No specific objections were raised by both of those government departments, because both of those government departments had satisfied themselves that the mitigations could be put in place to safeguard against the risk that might be faced. That's the reason.
Can I thank the Minister for his answers this afternoon? Point of order, Richard Holden.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. On a point of order, I raised in written parliamentary question 967 when I asked the Department of Health and Social Care to publish training modules and guidance related to first cousin marriage and genetic risk. The Government Minister replied that these materials existed but would not be published to this House or more widely. In written parliamentary question 102-870, I asked the Minister if he would place those training modules again in the Library of the House of Commons, and the Minister said there were no plans to do so. This is astonishing, since that answer came after a Freedom of Information request to NHS England, which had already placed those very documents in the public domain. Can you advise me, Madam Deputy Speaker, on how a Minister might come to this House and explain why, yet again, Parliament has been denied information that was in fact releasable, as you have warned against on many occasions?
Can I thank the honourable member for the advance notice of his point of order? He will know that as Chair I am not responsible for the answers that ministers give to written parliamentary questions, though he might also know that the Procedure Committee is currently holding an inquiry into this very issue, and I would encourage him to provide evidence and to raise his concerns with that committee. Which brings us to the 10-minute rule motion. Shaukat Adam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision about the detection, treatment and monitoring of glaucoma by optometrists in England, and to make provision about the full integration of optometry and ophthalmology services for the purpose of glaucoma care in England and for connected purposes. I would also like to refer the members to my register of interest as a practising NHS optometrist, and I would like to begin by thanking the Minister for being here for this valuable debate. As a practising optometrist for many years, one of the hard takes of the role is this, that during a routine eye examination, one detects a condition that will forever change that person who is sitting in my chair's life, and the patient is blissfully unaware of it. Because that's exactly what glaucoma does. It changes lives quietly and often without warning. Glaucoma is known as the thief of sight, and for a very good reason. Glaucoma damages the optic nerve at the back of the eye, with each nerve fibre representing a different point in the visual field. And because the loss begins in the peripheral vision, people often don't realise that anything is wrong until it's too late. So if members would like a glimpse of what an advanced glaucoma sufferer sees, could I ask them to just cover one eye completely, and with the other eye look through an aperture created by your hands and touch your fingertips to your palms. And as the condition progresses, the aperture gets smaller, smaller and smaller, until eventually nothing is left. Now imagine trying to navigate a busy high street, to cross a road, or even simply move safely around one's own home. This isn't simply theoretical. Let me give you just two very brief but very real examples from my experience. A woman who on two separate occasions, whilst driving, her car was hit by another car from the side before she finally came in for an eye test, unaware that there was a problem because she could see the number plate, she could see road signs perfectly clearly, but what she couldn't see was the side of her vision eroding. Oh, and secondly, a heartbreaking experience for me when a pensioner with a handbag packed with what looked like her life savings, cash in hand, explaining that she will spend whatever it takes if I could just give her a pair of glasses that would allow her to see her two loves. One was her love of painting, and the other was her love of her grandchildren. Unfortunately, no amount of money would be able to restore her sight, as glaucoma, as well as being silent, is usually irreversible. Glaucoma, in fact, is the leading cause of preventable blindness in the UK. Over 700,000 people are affected. And what is even more concerning is that more than half of them are undiagnosed. That's 350,000 people walking around, driving around, not knowing. This could be any one of us, someone we love, or someone we work with, as was with the case of a previous member of this House, Paul Tyler, a former Lib Dem member who was not diagnosed until a routine eye test. In its early stages, glaucoma rarely has symptoms, and there are rarely any warning signs, just a silent, slow death. By the time it's noticed, the damage is usually permanent, and the loss has far-reaching consequences. People lose not only their sight, but also their independence, the ability to drive, read, cook, or even leave their house. Falls increase, isolation grows, and then comes the emotional and mental health impacts, fear, depression, and loss of identity. Furthermore, with an ageing population, we are facing a growing crisis. Glaucoma cases are expected to dramatically rise in the next coming decades, with a growth rate that outstrips the ageing population. A study from 2017 suggested that over the next 20 years, glaucoma cases would rise by 44%. That's hundreds of thousands of more people needing care, follow-up and support. And I fear that data will prove to be an underestimate. So let me be blunt. Patients are losing their sight not because care doesn't exist, but because the pathway is broken and the follow-up is delayed. Just recently, I saw a patient who was referred to the hospital and diagnosed with glaucoma. That bit, absolutely fine. The initial appointment happened, but the follow-up was postponed. Then they missed an appointment. So by the time they came to see me again a year later, they had lost a significant amount of their visual field, to such an extent that even their central vision, their acuity, was affected. This anecdotal example corroborates with findings from major chains like Specsavers and others. The problem, current waiting list data only provides a measure of first appointments, not the ongoing care vital to chronic conditions like glaucoma. We need published data on follow-up waiting times because that's where sight is being lost. And here's the reality. Hospital ophthalmology is one of the largest outpatient specialities in the NHS, with 8.9 million appointments a year between 2023 and 2024 in England. It is estimated that glaucoma care accounts for about 20% of all hospital eye service appointments, with around 1 million visits annually across England alone. In 2024-25, it was reported that 600,000 people were on a hospital waiting list for an ophthalmology appointment. However, the ongoing care, such as the need for regular planned follow-up glaucoma patients, is often overlooked, with their numbers not hitting the headline like those waiting for an initial assessment or surgery. NHS hospitals cannot carry this load alone. Thankfully, Minister, this is where the government's own NHS 10-year plan, and in particular its ambition to shift care out of hospitals and into community and to focus on prevention, not sickness, closely aligns with the transformation needed in glaucoma care. There are over 14,000 qualified optometrists in England, providing more than 13 million NHS-funded eye tests. They are trained, regulated and ready to help. Community glaucoma services led by appropriately qualified optometrists with appropriate approved equipment have already demonstrated the ability to reduce hospital appointment referrals by up to 71%. If implemented nationally alongside an optometry-based glaucoma monitoring service, it may be possible to release 300,000 hospital appointments every year. That's not a one-time saving. Glaucoma is a chronic condition. These are recurring appointments for people who are living with, not cured of, the condition. Making full use of the skills and capacity already in primary care takes significant pressure off hospital services, enabling them to focus on tasks that can only be managed in a hospital. This could also save the NHS an estimated £12 million annually. At present, 10 ICBs have no glaucoma case-finding referral management services, and without this service, many patients in these areas who are referred to hospital could instead be retained in primary care optometry, with appropriate commissioning rather than adding to the existing waiting list. And even what is more concerning, 21, half of the ICBs, do not commission a glaucoma monitoring service in the community and rely simply on the hospital eye service to follow up glaucoma patients for the rest of their lives. This is where sight loss occurs, as the hospitals simply do not have the required capacity. It's a postcode lottery, one that punishes the vulnerable, especially when people from Black and Asian communities are up to 4 times more likely to develop glaucoma and often have the least access to timely care. As opposed to Wales and Scotland, where a shared care service for glaucoma is commissioned by every health board, optometry-led and properly integrated between primary care optometry and ophthalmology. And often the approach of NHS commissioners in England is hospital-led. The recent draft Getting It Right First Time model, developed with minimal input from primary care optometry, risks reinforcing England's hospital-led approach and undermining the government's own ambition to shift care from hospitals to the community. We are also seeing worrying behaviour at the ICB level, with several ICBs removing the limited community glaucoma services they had in place to make short-term savings. This is extremely myopic. Given ongoing financial pressures on ICBs, we do not expect individual ICBs to make significant progress in commissioning optometry-led glaucoma pathways that fully integrate optometry and ophthalmology without clear direction from the government. The total cost of visual impairment in the UK is now estimated to be £26.5 billion. set to rise to £33.5 billion by 2032. Glaucoma alone accounts for £750 million of it. And this is just not a cost to the NHS, but also the cost of lost productivity, informal care, and diminished quality of life. This is a silent epidemic, but it is not inevitable. So what am I asking for? What can be done to begin to tackle this silent epidemic? Fundamentally, I am asking for a national direction from the DHSC to ICBs that they should commission a uniformed primary care glaucoma service that utilises qualified high street optician practices, and only by doing so will we end the current postcode lottery in glaucoma care. We already know what works, we already have the workforce, and we already have the technology. We now need clear direction and a political will. Thank you.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Marsha de Cordova, Jim Shannon, Brian Lasham, Jeremy Corbyn, Ayub Khan, Iqbal Mohammed, Mr Adnan Hussain, Paulette Hamilton, Mark Pritchard, and Adrian Ramsey, and myself.
Shaukat Adam.
Glaucoma Care, England Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 13th of March, 2026.
Friday, the 13th of March, 2026. Programme motion to be moved formally.
I beg to move.
The question is as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Sentencing Bill, consideration of Lord's amendments.
Now.
I can inform the House that nothing in the Lord's amendments engages Commons financial privilege. We will begin with the government motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 7, with which it will be convenient to consider the other Lord's amendments and government amendments and motions as on the selection and grouping paper. I call the Minister to move the motion. Jake Richards.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And let me begin by putting on record the government's welcoming of the new Shadow Justice Secretary to his job. We look forward to working with him, Madam Deputy Speaker. He is somebody of some intellectual heft, and in any event, he's in the lucky position of having extraordinarily small shoes to fill. Of course, there will be policy disagreements, as there should be, but my hope is that the new Shadow Justice Secretary treads more carefully on issues around the independence of our judiciary and respecting our legal profession, perhaps fewer vitriolic social media videos and more thoughtful analysis. And as for the member for Newark, Madam Deputy Speaker, or as he likes to call himself, the new sheriff in town, we welcome that the inevitable has now happened, confirming the fact that reform is little more than a backwater for failed Tory politicians with an ego. And Madam Deputy Speaker, just briefly, I spent 5 minutes I'll never get back, reading the memo the former Shadow Justice Secretary left lying about. It says, and I quote, "Use humour, one of your best skills. Don't be afraid to be self-effacing or have a laugh." Well, it certainly got us laughing, Madam Deputy Speaker. And his memo also has the memorable line, "Don't think. You know things to be true. Get out of the habit of saying think." I happen to think he should get into the habit of thinking a little more. The honourable member for Newark says he has joined to be part of the team. We are still unclear whether he will remain speaking on justice issues. He's not in his new place today. Over the weekend, it was said that there would be a mini reshuffle at Reform, a rather depressing game of musical chairs. But whether their justice spokesperson remains the member for Runcorn, or if the member for Newark takes over, or if the member for Ashfield has a go, or if the member for East Wiltshire or the member for Romford joins in, the story is the same, Madam Deputy Speaker, failed former Tories who cannot be trusted with our justice system, let alone our country. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill will make sure that we are never again in the position that this government inherited. Prisons at risk of running out of places entirely, leaving us with nowhere to put dangerous offenders, police without the capacity to make arrests, courts unable to hold trials, and a breakdown of law and order unlike anything we have seen in modern times. That's why this bill is vital. It does not kick the can down the road. It does not shy away from making tough decisions to keep the public safe. Instead, it will end the cycle of crisis once and for all. And it does more than this. Absolutely.
Given way. He's given a powerful speech. He will recognise this is a bill that's of huge concern to residents of my constituency of Harlow, because obviously many of those who are waiting for justice to be served, they're victims of crime who are waiting years for their the person that's caused that offence to actually see a trial. So will you agree with me? It's really important this government gets on top of this backlog and gets people in front of courts as quickly as possible.
Absolutely, and my humble friend is a fine champion of this agenda, but also, of course, for his constituents in Harlow. And as he knows, this bill does more than just fixing the crisis we inherit. It will confront reoffending, keeping our communities safe. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, as my right honourable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, set out in the very first debate on the bill in this House, it takes us back to the fundamental purpose of sentencing, punishment that works for victims who deserve to see perpetrators face retribution, punishment that works for society, which wants criminals to return less dangerous, not more, and punishment that works to prevent crime. We want better citizens, not better criminals. That is what will deliver safer streets and protection from crime. This bill will restore the confidence of victims in the criminal justice system. And let me reiterate that nothing is worse for victims than prisons running out of places and crimes going without punishment, which is the situation we inherited when we came into government in the summer of 2024. Yes.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Minister for giving way, and the Minister has outlined very clearly what the Government and the Minister in particular is trying to achieve. There are some perceptions by the general public that certainly indicated in the press and the media that they feel that maybe the Government's going to be a bit soft on those who carry out crimes. But in the rehabilitative structure, which I am very much in favour of, and which I think maybe the Minister is in favour of as well, can he outline, please, what will be done to enable those when they leave prison to be rehabilitated and to ensure that they don't reoffend, because the rise in numbers of those who reoffend is incredibly worrying.
I welcome the Right Honourable Member's intervention. I'll be setting out in the course of this speech and more generally what this government is doing to ensure that we can increase rehabilitation and crack down on reoffending. But I would just say gently to the honourable gentleman, he states that there is a suggestion that this bill is somehow soft on crime. By the end of this Parliament, there will be more offenders in prison than ever before. So I completely reject that assertion. Briefly, Madam Deputy Speaker, I just want to pay tribute to the campaigners that have informed large parts of this piece of legislation and the amendments that we're discussing today. We are introducing tough restriction zones that limit the movement of offenders instead of limiting the movement of victims. These new restriction zones, which will be given to the most serious offenders on licence and can be imposed by a court, will pin any offender down to a specific location to ensure that the victims can move freely elsewhere. This was campaigned for by the founders of the Joanna Simpson Foundation, Diana Parks and Hetty Barkworth-Nanton. Once again, I pay tribute to them and to all of those who have campaigned for this crucial change. And Clause 6 of this bill introduces a new judicial finding of domestic abuse in sentencing, which enables probation to identify abusers early, to track patterns of behaviour and to put safeguards in place. On this, I must pay tribute to the Liberal Democrats in particular, and in particular the Honourable Member for Eastbourne, for his tireless campaigning and willingness to work across party to deliver this. I know that all parties opposite support this crucial change. It is worth remembering more generally, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this legislation was carefully drafted as a result of an independent sentencing review led by the former Conservative Justice Secretary, David Gork. I again take this opportunity. Great man, they're saying. They're voting against every single one of his proposals, Madam Deputy Speaker, but there we go. I take this opportunity to thank him again for all his work. It was a thorough, comprehensive and excellent piece of work. We are determined to ensure that the bill receives royal assent as soon as possible. There is an urgency to this process. And let me also remind the House that alongside this legislation, this government is building prison places at a faster rate than ever before. In our first year, we opened nearly 2,500 new places, and we are on track to add 14,000 by 2031. In the next 4 years alone, we will spend £4.7 billion on prison building, but we simply cannot build our way out of the crisis we inherited from the Conservatives. The pressures on the system demands that we reform sentencing, but let me also remind the House that nothing in this bill changes sentence for prisoners convicted of the most serious, heinous crimes who are serving extended, determinate or life sentences. And of course, this bill delivers vital reforms to our probation services. We are rebuilding the service the last government decimated. We are increasing investment up to £700 million by 2028-29, a 45% increase. And we are recruiting. We hired 1,000 trainee probation officers in our first year, and we're on track for 1,300 more this year. At this point, I want to pay tribute to all the hard-working probation officers in our country. They deserve full credit for what they do, and it has been important for us to find the extra resources to put into this service to grow the numbers and the support available. Absolutely.
In government, the party opposite oversaw a disastrous privatisation of probation, which ended in a £500 million bailout by taxpayers. Our probation service plays such a critical role in the rehabilitation of offenders and keeping our community safe. So can the Minister set out further how this bill will ensure that our probation systems are strengthened and fit for purpose?
Can the Minister perhaps restrict himself to the amendments?
Yes.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the intervention from my honourable friend. I'll be coming on to that issue shortly. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to address Lord's Amendment number 7. Whilst we cannot support the amendment as drafted, we fully support the intention behind it, to promote transparency and improve the experience of victims. We agree that robust processes are required to ensure the accuracy of transcripts, but placing a statutory duty on the judiciary to approve the release of all Crown Court transcripts could significantly increase workload and undermine efforts to drive down the Crown Court backlog. However, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm delighted to say that we have tabled a government amendment that will expand the provision of Crown Court sentencing remarks to all victims who request them free of charge. This new clause puts victims firmly at the centre of the process, ensuring that every victim can request and receive relevant sentencing remarks for free. This clause delivers a major step forward for transparency, enabling victims to digest sentencing remarks outside of the pressures of a courtroom setting and free of charge. The details on timeframes and processes will be set out in due course, but I can confirm our intention to the House that this will specify that transcripts will be provided within 14 days of a request being made. This timeframe will support applications made under the unduly lenient sentencing scheme, and I can also assure the House that we are considering the opposition's amendments to the Victims and Courts Bill, which would extend this deadline to 56 days, extremely carefully. I'm grateful to members of this House for their engagement on this issue. This change represents a profound step forward for victims and for transparency in our justice. I know that the honourable members for Richmond, Warrington North and Lowestoft have been campaigning on this issue for some time. They deserve great credit, in particular the member for Richmond, if I may. And so for the first time, every victim whose case is heard in the Crown Court will have this important right of access free of charge. I turn now to Lord's Amendment 1. And again, I must begin by thanking the honourable member for Bexhill and Battle, the Shadow Justice Minister, and the parents of Lenny Scott, an ex-prison officer murdered by a former inmate in a horrendous revenge attack. This amendment meets their call for a small but important reform to sentencing around whole life orders. We recognise the unique and dangerous job that police, prison and probation officers do. They perform a distinctive role with routine contact with dangerous offenders. We want to ensure, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the exceptional seriousness of murders that are motivated by their important work, which strike at the heart of the rule of law, are expressly recognised in the sentencing framework for murder.
Will the Minister give way?
Yes, of course.
I thank the Minister for giving way. A comment often made to me and my colleagues when I was policing, as soon as I left the police station in full uniform, I was a sitting target every single day. Does the Minister agree that the mandatory whole life sentence is proposed for those who murder police officers, prison officers and probation officers sends a clear and unequivocal message that they will be met with the harshest and most serious penalties on offer to the court?
Absolutely, and I thank my humble friend for his service and his contribution and his support for this amendment. As I said when I had the great privilege of meeting Lenny's parents last week with the Shadow Justice Minister and Lord Timpson in the other place, It's not just about the technical mischief that this amendment solves, because thankfully these cases are few and far between. It is about sending a signal to the brilliant prison officers and probation officers that the work they do is respected by people in this place, in the country at large, and that we can make this small change as part of this legislation, I hope, goes some way to doing that. And indeed, I've met prison officers since we've announced this change who have intimated their gratitude to Lenny Scott's parents in particular and to this place for hopefully making this change. And that's very welcome indeed. I want now to move, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the amendments 2 to 5, which relate to Sentencing Council. Through these, we have sought to help clarify what is expected from the Lord Chancellor and the Lady Chief Justice when considering any approval requests from the Sentencing Council for its business plans and sentencing guidelines. Broadly speaking, these amendments do 3 things. First, if the Lord Chancellor decided not to approve a business plan, Amendment 2 requires them to notify the Council. It also requires them to lay a document before Parliament as soon as practicable, stating the reasons for that decision. Amendments 3 and 4 make similar provisions under different guises. Secondly, we want to make it clear that there is a very high bar that must be met for any guidelines to be rejected. Amendments 4 and 5 therefore provide that guidelines can only be rejected when this is necessary to maintain public confidence in the justice system. Finally, we have set out on the face of the bill that any approval requests from the Council are to be considered as soon as practicable. Taken together, Madam Deputy Speaker, these amendments represent a significant step by the Government to ensure that these approval processes are surrounded by clear safeguards, transparency and accountability. Yes, absolutely.
Giving way, while the Lords have endeavoured to amend the bill in a number of areas, the provisions of Part 4 allowing foreign national offenders to be deported at any time within their sentence is very important to Northern Ireland. Given Article 2 of the Windsor Framework, that assessment has been made of the risk that these offenders will actually not be removed, leaving Northern Ireland with a 2-tier system in which foreign criminals benefit from additional EU-derived human rights protections rather than being sent home. Would you commit to meet with myself and a number of my colleagues on this important issue to Northern Ireland?
This issue was raised, I think, at second reading and at report stage by one of the honourable member's colleagues. The legal advice that we have received simply states that there is no discrepancy in Northern Ireland. I'm very happy to have a conversation with you and any other colleagues on that. It's clearly only right that these provisions apply also to Northern Ireland as well. Madam Deputy Speaker, this Government is committed to greater transparency on prison and probation capacity and holding current and future governments to account. We have demonstrated this by publishing the first annual statement on prison capacity in December 2024. The 2025 edition will follow shortly. This amendment delivers on that promise by making it a statutory requirement to lay a statement before Parliament each year. Legislating on this duty ensures transparency in the long term and delivers on the Government's commitment to do so. Never again we will be in a situation that this Government inherited, where the previous Government had overlooked prison capacity for 14 years, leading to the crisis that we had to deal with. The Government has also accepted Amendment 12, which removes the clause in the bill that would have introduced the power to publish the names and photographs of those subject to an unpaid work requirement. The purpose of this clause was to increase the visibility of community payback and ensure the public can clearly see justice being delivered. We remain committed to ensuring that local communities can see the benefits of community payback in their area. However, we have listened carefully to the issues raised in both houses concerning this measure, and perhaps more importantly, the concerns raised by our brilliant probation and prison staff on the ground. And after careful consideration, we do not consider it appropriate to proceed any further. We are confident that current delivery of unpaid work, bolstered by wider provisions in this bill, means that unpaid work will continue to be tough and visible without the addition of this specific measure. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are very pleased to have made further progress on the issue of IPP sentences. We want to do everything we can to support those who are still serving these sentences to progress to the end of their sentence, but we are not willing to undermine public protection. The amendments made in this bill strike that careful balance. The Victims and Prisoners Act 2024 made significant changes to the IPP licence period. The qualifying period for referral to the parole board for consideration of licence termination was reduced. It went from 10 years after first release to 3 years for those serving the IPP sentence and 2 years for those serving the DPP sentence who were convicted when they were under 18. It has now been over a year since the first of these measures came into force. 1,700 people had their licence terminated automatically on the 1st of November 2024, and a further 600 became eligible for referral to the parole board on the 1st of February of last year, we have now gone further by providing those serving the IPP sentence with an earlier opportunity for licence termination and an additional opportunity for those serving IPP and DPP sentence thereafter. Those serving an IPP sentence will be considered for licence termination 2 years after release rather than the current 3 years. This provides suitable time for support and rehabilitation in the community, whilst ensuring our communities are best protected from harm.
Would the Minister give way?
Yes, absolutely.
I thank him for giving way, and I welcome the amendments relating to IPP sentences. It's a matter of concern to many across the House. Can the Minister assure the House that changes to IPP licence termination will continue to provide for community rehabilitation whilst protecting communities from harm? And can the Minister also commit to continuing to work to resolve the remaining challenges around these sentences?
Absolutely. And my honourable friend, as a member of the Justice Select Committee, always brings thoughtful contribution on justice issues, but in particular IPP. There is that balance that has to be struck between protecting public safety, but also ensuring that there is rehabilitation. The government thinks that this legislation has gone some way to doing that, but there is always room for further review and assessment as we go forward. And I know that Lord Timpson, who's leading on this piece of work for the government, will continue to engage, certainly with the Justice Select Committee on this issue. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful for the improvements that have been made to this bill during its passage in the House of Lords, and I hope, in particular with the undertakings I've given on the provision of sentencing transcripts, I hope that all parties will be able to support the government's amendments in lieu of Amendment 7. These represent a major step forward for transparency and for victims, and I beg to move these amendments.
The question is that this House disagrees with the Lords in their Amendment 7. I call Shadow Minister Dr Kieran Mullen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And as we've heard today, the House is considering amendments made in the other place to the sentencing bill. There is no doubt that our justice system is facing significant challenges. I've always acknowledged this, and during recent debates on a wide range of issues from sentencing to prison capacity to probation to jury trials, there's been cross-party acknowledgement that for decades, across a number of governments of different colours, there hasn't been sufficient investment or political priority given to our justice system. But that should not and must not serve as an excuse for this government to bring forward changes to our justice system that damage it, fail to actually address the challenges before us, and slip through the net changes that elements of the Ministry of Justice have always wanted to do and are simply using the excuse of the current challenges to finally pull off. But that is what we are seeing, both in relation to the proposals on jury trials and even more clearly to the clear detriment of victims in this sentencing bill. I welcome elements of this bill. Some of the examples we'll go on to discuss and the Minister mentioned, for example, the restriction zones, the domestic abuse markers, but these are overwhelmingly outweighed by the fact that the heart of this bill is a catastrophic blow to the victim's search for justice, as it will let out thousands of rapists, paedophiles and seriously violent offenders out of prison earlier. The Minister mentioned in his opening remarks the independent sentencing review, and I remind members of this House that the independent sentencing review gave absolutely no consideration whatsoever to what victims and the public would think of the proposals related to sentencing. And actually that report is an insult to victims and their families, and many of them have told me directly. At least during the common stages of this bill, every other party joined the Conservatives in voting against these dangerous proposals, including the Liberal Democrats, and in fact a number of Labour MPs bravely abstained. It should be a matter of deep shame for the Liberal Democrat Party that they have since joined Labour in voting to let rapists and paedophiles and seriously violent offenders out of prison earlier, especially as they so clearly articulated why this was wrong before. A complete betrayal of serious victims of crime and their families. This is likely my final opportunity to say to this House and MPs opposite that I'm confident they will come to regret these elements of the bill and will find it difficult to explain themselves to victims when they see perpetrators of crimes like rape, child sex offences and child grooming leave prison sometimes only after having served a third of their sentence because of their support for these measures. I will do whatever I can to ensure those victims know who made those choices when there were so many other alternatives available to them. But as I do have to accept that this government majority, with the help of the Liberal Democrats, has ended that campaign for now, we should consider the amendments of this bill before the House today. And as I know the public greatly value constructive cross-party work